Well, look what we have here. The commander-in-chief paused right in the middle of a phrase, having been discussing the newly released files, the specific documents Tulsi Gabbard had made public that very morning, which confirmed everything he had been arguing for 8 long years, proving in his eyes that the whole Russia inquiry was fabricated from thin air. He stood in the Rose Garden, his preferred venue for media briefings due to the flattering lighting and the picturesque scenery, not to mention the short stroll back to the Oval Office that allowed him to end on a high note and be seated behind his desk before the cable news feeds cut away. 200 journalists and 30 cameras filled the space on an October afternoon so crisp it resembled an oil painting. While he had been speaking about the intelligence community's assessment, calling it a total sham, an absolute invention, and honestly, a humiliation for the intelligence agencies which used to be magnificent, truly the finest globally, but had transformed. And he hated saying it because he truly admired the service members into a partisan weapon for the opposition. When the disturbance began, it started at the rear of the press corps, a quiet ripple of heads turning and Secret Service agents whispering into their cuffs, marking a figure navigating through the media zone who was neither a reporter nor a technician, but a man in a dark blue suit and red tie, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who knew his destination and meant for everyone to witness his entrance. It was Adam Schiff, the Democratic senator from California, the former head of the House Intelligence Committee, the previous lead impeachment manager, an ex-member of the January 6th Select Committee, and, in the opinion of the man at the podium, the single most deceitful individual in the annals of American governance. He had not received an invitation, yet his office would later clarify he was there to exercise his senatorial privilege to respond to the president's inaccuracies regarding the Russia probe, arguing that the declassified papers were being twisted and that someone needed to confront the misinformation because Adam Schiff had spent 8 years refusing to bow to Donald Trump and wasn't about to start now. However, what he hadn't accounted for, what his staff had missed, and what his communications director, legal team, and chief of staff had all failed to foresee was the expression on Donald Trump's face when the president spotted his oldest adversary walking into his own backyard. It was a grin, the broad, predatory, overjoyed grin of a man who has been anticipating a moment for a very long time, and just realized it is being delivered to him without cost. Pencil neck himself, ladies and gentlemen, would you look at this? Adam Schiff in the Rose Garden. I didn't invite him. Nobody invited him. He just appeared like a bad penny, like a, what's the word? A party crasher. He is crashing my press event. The press corps exploded into noise, cameras swung around, and reporters yelled inquiries. But Trump silenced them all with a hand gesture perfected over 4 decades in the limelight, a signal that meant, quiet down. I am about to do something you will want to watch. Come on up here, Adam. Come on, don't be bashful. You weren't bashful when you went on CNN every single night for 7 years. You weren't bashful when you read a false transcript into the congressional record. Come up here and say it to my face because I have been waiting for this for 8 years. I have been waiting. Schiff halted about 20 feet from the stage, standing in the pit, where journalists usually stood behind the rope among the lenses at ground level, while the podium remained on an elevated platform, meaning Trump looked down while Schiff looked up, and the geometry alone narrated the tale. The president above, the senator below. You can come closer, Trump insisted, and his tone shifted from a shout to something nearly conversational, almost inviting, the voice of a host welcoming a guest he planned to obliterate. I know the walk is difficult with that neck supporting such a large head, but come on, I want the country to see this. I want them to see us together for the first time, the president and the man who attempted to ruin him, standing right here in the Rose Garden, the most stunning garden on Earth, by the way. And I want to ask just one question, just one very easy one. He leaned into the mic. Who won? To comprehend the gravity of that inquiry, to understand why 200 journalists held their breath and 30 cameras zoomed in tight, and why the White House press staff stood paralyzed against the columns like statues in a museum, you must realize that this was no ordinary political skirmish, but the climax of the most personal, vicious, and prolonged feud in modern American history. 8 years, 2 impeachment trials, 1 special counsel probe, 1 censure vote, thousands of social media posts, hundreds of cable TV spots, and nicknames like Pencil Neck, Shifty Schiff, Watermelon Head, and Crooked Adam were so plentiful that Trump's own aides had pleaded with him to choose one and stick to it. Yet he refused because, as he told an assistant, why pick one when they all work? The conflict had started in 2017 when Schiff, as the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, began appearing on news networks to discuss the FBI's inquiry into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. At first, his spots were calculated, lawyerly, and exact. But then they became more frequent, more specific, until one Sunday morning in March 2017, Adam Schiff looked into an MSNBC lens and uttered the phrase that would define his career and haunt his legacy. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into details, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now, more than just circumstantial evidence. He said it on MSNBC, he said it on CNN, he said it on ABC, he repeated it dozens of times, then hundreds. He spoke with the quiet confidence of a man who had viewed classified intel and was signaling to the American public, as much as he was allowed, that what he had witnessed was damning, and the country believed him. Or at least half the country did, because he was the Intelligence Committee chairman and possessed access to data that regular citizens lacked. The issue was that the proof did not exist. Robert Mueller's probe, which spanned 22 months, cost roughly $32 million, and interrogated over 500 witnesses, determined in its first volume that the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference efforts. The Durham report, published in 2023, went even further, concluding that the FBI had failed to maintain their critical mission of strict adherence to the law when launching the probe, and the classified transcripts of witnesses who testified before Schiff's own panel, transcripts Schiff kept hidden until forced to release them, demonstrated that every single Obama administration official who testified under oath stated the same thing. They had seen no direct proof of collusion. Schiff had heard them say it inside his own committee room under oath. And then he had walked out of that chamber and told America the exact opposite. Trump had labeled him a liar from the start. For 8 years, Trump had called him a fraud, a leaker, a traitor, and a disgrace. He had sold merchandise, mocking Schiff's looks. He had demanded his prosecution. He had called for his removal from Congress. And in June 2023, the House voted 213 to 209 to censure Schiff, formally rebuking him for deceiving the public by claiming evidence of collusion that wasn't there. Schiff had termed the censure a badge of honor, and now he stood in the Rose Garden 20 feet from the man who had been calling him Pencil Neck since 2019, while the entire nation watched. Trump smiled, having not ceased smiling since Schiff arrived, and said, "Adam, I have some questions for you, and I know you aren't used to answering questions. You are used to asking them, sitting in your little committee room with your little gavel and your very serious face. You know the face, right? The one where you look like you just discovered your dog passed away. That face. You love that face. The cameras love that face. CNN especially loves that face, although nobody watches CNN, so I don't know why you bother. Causing nervous laughter from the press area, where a few reporters covered their mouths because this was unprofessional and beneath the dignity of the office, but also, as everyone knew, impossible to ignore. Here is my first question. Very simple. You went on TV, every channel, every program, any mic you could locate, and for 7 years you claimed you had proof that I colluded with Russia, more than circumstantial evidence. Those were your exact words. You said them so often that I think even you began to believe them, like one of those guys who repeats a lie until he forgets it is a lie. Robert Mueller spent $32 million, Adam, $32 million, which is a lot of cash, even by Washington standards, interviewed 500 witnesses over 2 years, and at the end of it, page 2 of Volume 1, I have it memorized because I read it more than you did, stated the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. It did not establish no collusion, no conspiracy, no coordination, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So my inquiry, Adam, and take your time because the weather is lovely and the roses are blooming and we have all afternoon, is where is the evidence? Where is this more than circumstantial evidence that you told America about for 7 years? Can you show it to us? Can you hold it up? Can you point to it? Because I have been searching for it for 8 years and I cannot find it. Mueller couldn't find it. Durham couldn't find it. And now Tulsi, great Tulsi Gabbard, an unbelievable person. Tulsi just declassified the transcripts from your committee, your own witnesses under oath, and they all said the same thing. No evidence. Clapper said it. Rice said it. Yates said it. Power said it. They all said it to your face in your committee room, and you heard them say it. And then you walked out of that room, got in front of a camera, and told the American people you had more than circumstantial evidence. You knew it wasn't true. You knew because you just heard the witnesses say it wasn't true, and you lied regardless. That is not politics, Adam. That is fraud. And if I did that in real estate, if I told a buyer I had proof a building was worth $100 million when I knew it was worth 10, I would be in prison. In prison! But you did it for 7 years on national television, and nothing happened. Nothing. Because you are a Democrat in California. And in California, you can lie every day of the week and twice on Sunday, and nobody cares. Schiff had been standing with his arms crossed, his expression the rehearsed mask of a man who has been insulted by Donald Trump so frequently that the insults have become background static. But he uncrossed his arms and spoke. Mr. President, the evidence of your campaign's interactions with Russian operatives was extensively documented in the Mueller report. Over 200 contacts between your campaign and Russian-linked individuals, 34 indictments, 7 convictions, and the evidence was presented in open hearings and in classified sessions that you continue to misrepresent. Trump was grinning before Schiff finished his second sentence. 200 contacts. He is back to the contacts. 200 contacts. Adam, a contact is when someone shakes your hand at a conference. A contact is when you are at a dinner and someone sits at your table. I have contacts with everyone. I met the Pope. I met the Queen. I had dinner with the President of China. That doesn't mean I am working for the Vatican. Laughter erupted, genuine this time, even from reporters who didn't want to laugh, because the image of Trump working for the Vatican was absurd, in the specific way Trump's comedy was always absurd, exaggerated, but built on a valid point. And the convictions he brings up, the convictions, you know what those convictions were for? Tax fraud, bank fraud, lying to Congress, which is Schiff's specialty. None of them, not one, was for colluding with Russia. You know who got convicted of collusion. Nobody. Nobody, because there was no collusion. But let me move on, because I could discuss this all day. I really could. It is my favorite subject other than the economy, which is doing great, by the way. Record stock market, record low unemployment. But I want to talk about something else. Something that still makes me, and I don't get angry very often. I am a very calm person, very even-tempered. Ask anyone. Something that still makes me angry. September 26th, 2019, Adam. You remember that day. I know you do, because that is the day you committed what I believe is the greatest fraud ever perpetrated in a congressional hearing room. He leaned forward on the podium. The entertainment was over. This was the prosecutorial Trump. The Trump who had sat through depositions and contract negotiations and board meetings for 40 years and knew how to close. You got up at a hearing, an Intelligence Committee hearing on live television, cameras from every network, and you read a transcript of my phone call with President Zelensky, except, and this is the part that still amazes me, it wasn't the transcript. You made it up. You sat in that chair and you read words that I never said. You claimed I told Zelensky, I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. I never said that, never. You claimed I told him, I am going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen. Good. I never said that either. You fabricated the entire conversation. You invented a phone call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine, and you read it out loud in a congressional hearing into the official record. And when Mike Turner, great congressman, very smart, when Mike Turner caught you, when he pointed out that those weren't my words, you know what you said, and I want everyone to hear this. You said it was a parody. Trump paused to let it hang. A parody. He read a fabricated presidential phone call into the congressional record, the permanent official record of the United States Congress, and he called it a parody. That is like me fabricating a confession from Adam Schiff, and then when I get caught saying it was a joke. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if I did that? They would impeach me again now, a 3rd time. But Schiff fabricates a phone call, and it's a parody, it's comedy, it's satire. He turned to Schiff. Was it a parody, Adam, when you sat in that chair and read fake words to the American people? Was that your sense of humor? Because I have done comedy. I hosted Saturday Night Live. I know comedy. And that wasn't comedy. That was forgery. That was a forged document, read into the official record of the United States Congress by the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. And you called it a parody. You called fraud a parody. But wait, there is more. There is always more with this guy. It is like an infomercial. But wait, there is more. The whistleblower. Remember the whistleblower? Big story. Biggest story in the world for about 3 weeks. Somebody filed a complaint about my phone call with Zelensky. And Schiff goes on MSNBC September 17th, 2019. I have the date memorized because I have a very good memory. Probably the best memory of any president. Definitely better than Biden's. And he says very seriously, very concerned with that face, we have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. Those were his words on national television to a very small audience because it was MSNBC, but still. And then, and this is the beautiful part, it comes out that the whistleblower had contacted Schiff's staff before filing the complaint. Before the whistleblower went to Schiff's people first, got guidance, got advice, and then filed the complaint. And Schiff knew. He knew the whole time. He knew when he went on television and said, "We have not spoken." He knew his staff had spoken. He knew he was lying. And PolitiFact, which hates me, I want to be clear about that. They hate me. They have rated approximately 1,000 of my statements as pants on fire. Even PolitiFact looked at Schiff's claim and rated it false. False. When PolitiFact says a Democrat is lying, that is like, I don't know, that is like Rachel Maddow saying, I have good hair. It never happens, but it happened for Schiff because the lie was so obvious that even the people who rate me as a liar couldn't ignore it. And here is what really gets me. Here is the part that makes me crazy. When the coordination came out, when everyone found out that the whistleblower had talked to Schiff's staff, you know what Schiff did. He reversed his position. He had been demanding that the whistleblower testify publicly, demanding it, saying the American people deserve to hear from the whistleblower. And then the second the coordination was exposed, he flipped. Suddenly, the whistleblower needed to be protected. Suddenly, it was too dangerous for the whistleblower to testify. Not because it was dangerous, but because the whistleblower would have had to answer questions about why he went to Schiff's staff first. Adam, that is not oversight. That is not investigation. That is a setup. You coordinated with the whistleblower, lied about the coordination, and then blocked the testimony that would have exposed the lie. That is not what a chairman does. That is what a criminal does. And I should know. You investigated me for 4 years, looking for exactly that kind of behavior. Trump turned to the reporters. And speaking of crimes, Kash, great Kash Patel, incredible guy, director of the FBI, best we have ever had. Kash declassified some FBI interview notes last month. 302s. That is what they call them. 30s. It is a very technical term. I know all the technical terms because I have been investigated more than any human being in history. These 302s are interviews the FBI did with a former staffer on Schiff's committee, a Democrat staffer, not a Republican plant, a Democrat. And this staffer told the FBI under penalty of perjury, by the way, this isn't Twitter, this is the FBI, he told them that Schiff directed his staff to leak classified information, classified about me, about the Russia investigation to the media. The staffer said Schiff told the group at a staff meeting, not a secret meeting, a regular staff meeting, that they would leak classified information that was derogatory to the President of the United States. That is me, by the way, in case anyone is confused. Derogatory to me. And that the information would be used to, and I am quoting here, indict the president. Now, if a Republican leaked classified information to the media to destroy a Democrat, you know what would happen. Prison. Immediate. No questions. No investigation. Prison. But Schiff does it, and nothing. Nothing happens. Because he has got the right letter after his name. D for Democrat. D for dishonest. D for, well, I could think of other words, but I will keep it clean because there are ladies present. He shook his head, then abruptly shifted again from serious to playful. You know, I have called him a lot of names over the years. A lot. People say, "Sir, you have too many nicknames for Adam Schiff." They say, "Pick one and stick with it." And I say, why? Why would I pick one? He deserves all of them. Shifty Schiff because he is shifty. Pencil neck because, well, look at him. He gestured toward Schiff with an open hand like a game show host revealing a prize that nobody wanted. He buys, and I am told this is true, he buys the smallest shirt collar they make, the absolute smallest, and it is still loose. How does that work? I am serious. How does physics allow that? You have got this enormous head, really, really big head, sitting on a neck that is like, I don't know, like somebody put a watermelon on top of a pencil, hence pencil neck and watermelon head, 2 for 1, 2 nicknames for the price of 1, only from Trump. Laughter came even from the Secret Service agents who were trained not to react, even from Schiff's own aide who was standing 20 yards away, and immediately looked at the ground. He looks like a bobblehead doll, you know the ones they give out at baseball games. That Schiff, a bobblehead that went to Harvard or wherever he went. Did he go to Harvard? Stanford? I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is he looks like if you flicked his head, it would wobble for 20 minutes. And I know the media is going to write Trump attacks Schiff's appearance, and I want to be clear, I am not attacking, I am observing. I am an observer, a very good observer. I observe things that other people are too polite to mention, and I am mentioning it because somebody has to. From 20 feet away, Schiff spoke. His voice was calm, controlled, the voice of a man who had decided to deploy dignity against mockery. Mr. President, while you are entertaining yourself with comments about my appearance, perhaps we could discuss the Constitution of the United States, which you swore an oath to protect, and which you have systematically undermined for 8 years. Trump pounced, not on the Constitution, but on the opportunity. The Constitution. He brings up the Constitution. I love the Constitution. Nobody loves the Constitution more than me. Well, maybe Thomas Jefferson, but he is dead, so I am number one. But, Adam, you read a fake transcript into the congressional record, you coordinated with a whistleblower, and then went on MSNBC, which nobody watches, by the way, and lied about it. PolitiFact. PolitiFact, which hates me. They rate everything I say as pants on fire, but even they rated your whistleblower claim as false. When PolitiFact says a Democrat is lying, that is like MSNBC saying I have nice hair. It never happens. And you want to lecture me about the Constitution. Adam, you got censured by the House of Representatives, your own institution. June 2023. Vote of 213 to 209. They made you stand in the well of the House. The well. The very center of the chamber where you stand, when the institution wants to publicly tell you that you embarrassed it. And they read a resolution that said you misled the American people by claiming evidence that did not exist. And you know what you said? You said it was a badge of honor. A badge of honor. Getting censured for lying is a badge of honor. Only in the Democratic Party. Only in California. Only in Adam Schiff's head, which is very large, by the way, as we discussed. Could getting publicly reprimanded by your own colleagues be considered an achievement? I got impeached twice. You know what I called it? A disgrace. Because I was innocent. Because it was political persecution, and I fought it, and I won twice. And I am standing right here in the Rose Garden, the President of the United States. And you are standing over there next to the guy from CNN who got the last badge, Adam. And by the way, the impeachments, let's talk about the impeachments because Schiff didn't just investigate them, he led them. He was the lead manager, the star, the quarterback of impeachment. He stood up in the Senate, and gave this big dramatic speech about how I was a threat to the Republic, and how nobody is above the law, and how the founders would be rolling in their graves. Very dramatic, very emotional, I'll give him credit, very well delivered, good performance. Not as good as mine, obviously, but for a Democrat, it was pretty good. And you know what happened? The Senate voted to acquit me. Not once. Twice. 2 impeachments. 2 acquittals. I am the only president in history who was impeached twice and won twice. Nobody talks about the winning part. They only talk about the impeachment part. But I won both times. And you know what else I did? I ran for president again and I won again. More votes than the first time. 80 million votes. The most votes any Republican has ever gotten after 2 impeachments. So Adam, you impeached me and I came back stronger. You investigated me and I became more popular. You tried to destroy me and I became president again. At some point, don't you look in the mirror, that big bobblehead mirror, and say, maybe I am the one who is wrong. Maybe the American people don't agree with me. Maybe they see something I don't. No, he doesn't, because Adam Schiff is the most self-righteous person in Washington, and in Washington, that is really saying something. And oh, this is beautiful. You know what happened when I won in 2024? You know what Biden did on his way out the door. He issued preemptive pardons. Preemptive for Schiff, for the whole January 6th committee, all of them, before I could even take office. Now think about that. Think about what that means. Why would you pardon someone who hasn't been charged with anything? Why would you pardon someone who hasn't been accused of a crime unless you know that they did something that could be a crime? Biden pardoned Schiff because Biden knew what Schiff did. The leaks, the classified information, the coordination, the lies. Biden knew, and he pardoned him to make sure I couldn't prosecute him. That is not a pardon. That is an escape hatch. That is Biden opening the emergency exit for his buddy before the plane crashes. And Schiff accepted. He accepted the pardon. If you are innocent, if you did nothing wrong, why do you accept a pardon? That is like accepting a life jacket when you claim the boat isn't sinking. You accepted the pardon, Adam, because you knew you needed it. Trump paused, looked at Schiff, then at the reporters, then back at Schiff, allowing the question to echo, warming up rather than winding down, feeling the rhythm, the momentum, the strange alchemy of crowd energy and personal grievance and raw performance that had carried him through rallies and debates and press conferences for a decade. He was in this moment doing what he had always done better than anyone else in American politics, commanding attention, not requesting it, not earning it through careful argument and measured rhetoric, but commanding it by being impossible to ignore. But here is the thing, he said, and his voice dropped not to a whisper. Trump didn't whisper, but to a register that the reporters in the front row recognized as the setup for something serious. Here is the thing, Adam and I want you to listen to this because it is going to bother you. It is really going to bother you because you have spent your entire career positioning yourself as Mr. Integrity, Mr. Rule of Law, Mr. I'm just doing my duty, Mr. Nobody is above the law. That is your brand. That is what you sell. Adam Schiff, the man who holds powerful people accountable. And you can't even fill out a mortgage application, honestly. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, not me, not Republicans, the FHFA, a federal agency referred you to the Department of Justice for mortgage fraud. You told the bank that your house in Maryland was your primary residence so you could get a cheaper rate on a Fannie Mae loan. But Adam, you are a congressman from California. You have to live in California. That is where your district is. That is where your voters are. So you also told California that your condo was your primary residence to get a state tax exemption. 2 primary residences at the same time in 2 different states. That is not a congressman. That is a magician. You were in 2 places at once. What are you? A quantum physicist, Schrodinger's senator, simultaneously living in Maryland and California until someone opens the box. Laughter. Even Trump laughed. The genuine laugh. The one that showed he surprised himself with his own joke. 5 Fannie Mae loans over 16 years, 5. And on every single one, the question of occupancy and the FBI, my FBI, by the way, the one you keep saying I weaponized, the FBI is now investigating whether you lied on all 5 times. And this is the man who investigated me for corruption. This man who can't even buy a house without committing fraud. He investigated me. I build buildings, Adam. I build towers. I build things that are so big you can see them from space. You can't even fill out a Fannie Mae form without lying, and you had the nerve to sit in that committee room and look into a camera and say, I was corrupt. You, the guy with 2 primary residences and 0 evidence. Schiff had been standing through all of it, the mockery, the nicknames, the laughter. He had absorbed it the way he always absorbed Trump's attacks, with the rigid posture and fixed expression of a man who believes that dignity is its own defense. Now he stepped forward 1 step closer to the podium, closer to Trump, close enough that the microphones would catch his voice without amplification. "Mr. President," he said, and his voice was quiet, composed, the voice of a man making a closing argument to a jury. "You can insult my appearance. You can mock my name. You can sell T-shirts with my face on them. None of that changes the fact that you are a threat to the Constitution of the United States, to the rule of law, and to the democratic institutions that have sustained this republic for 250 years. I investigated you because the evidence demanded it. I impeached you because the facts required it. I sat on the January 6th committee because an insurrection required it. And I would do it all again." It was the best thing he'd said all afternoon, his best line, his most senatorial moment. The cameras caught it. The reporters scribbled it. MSNBC would run it on a loop for 3 days. On paper, on transcript, in the language of institutions and norms, it was a powerful statement from a United States senator standing his ground against a president who was mocking him in his own garden. Trump waited 3 seconds. The audience, reporters, staff, Secret Service watched. Then he spoke 2 words. "Are you done?" Schiff paused. "I am good." Trump said, "Good speech, very noble, very emotional, very, what's the word, senatorial. You should put it on a bumper sticker. But Adam, since you brought up facts, since you, of all people, brought up facts, let me give you some." His voice changed. The comedy was gone. The crowd work was gone. The nicknames were gone. What remained was the voice that people who had negotiated with Donald Trump in business had heard for 40 years, flat, direct, and relentless. "You said you had evidence of Russia collusion. You didn't. Mueller said so. Durham said so. Your own witnesses said so. You read a fake transcript into the congressional record. When you got caught, you called it a parody. You told America you hadn't spoken to the whistleblower. PolitiFact rated that false. You got censured by the House of Representatives for misleading the American people. You called it a badge of honor. The FBI is investigating you for mortgage fraud, and Tulsi just declassified documents showing that every witness who testified to your committee under oath, Adam, under oath, said there was no evidence of collusion. Every single one. And you knew it. You sat in those hearings. You heard them say it. And you walked outside and told America the opposite for 7 years. 7 years. That is longer than World War II. That is longer than most marriages. 7 years of looking into a camera and saying things you knew were not true, because it helped you, because it made you famous, because it raised money, because it got you on television, because it made you the hero of people who hated me. And now you come here to my house, the White House, the People's House, to lecture me about the Constitution." He paused, and then he did something he almost never did. He got quiet, not soft. Trump was never soft, but quiet. The volume dropped. The rhythm slowed. The performance stopped. What was left was a man talking to another man, and the country could hear both of them breathing. "Adam, I build buildings, real buildings, in New York, in Chicago, in Las Vegas. Buildings you can see and touch and walk into and look up at. When I say a building is 50 stories, you can count the floors. When I say it is made of steel, you can knock on it. Real things, things that exist. You built a hoax, a beautiful, elaborate 7-year hoax. Millions of people believed it because you said it with that face. That very serious, very concerned, very trustworthy face. And for 7 years the hoax stood. Not because the evidence supported it, but because your face supported it. But hoaxes don't last, Adam. Buildings last, hoaxes don't. And yours collapsed. The documents are out. The transcripts are public. Mueller said no collusion. Durham said the FBI cut corners. Tulsi declassified everything. Your committee tried to hide your hoax. It is a pile of rubble, and you are standing in the rubble trying to tell me I am the one who is wrong. He straightened up. The quiet was over. The performance resumed. You impeached me twice. I won twice. You investigated me for 4 years. I am president again. You got censured. I got re-elected. You ran for Senate. I run the country, and I am the threat to the Constitution. He turned to the press corps, 200 reporters, 30 cameras, the biggest audience any press conference had drawn all year. Who do you believe, him or your own eyes? He turned back to Schiff one last time. The smile returned, but different now. Not the predatory grin of the opening, something closer to dismissal. The way a man looks at a chapter of his life that is finally closing. Go home, pencil neck. Go home. 8 words, 8 years. Schiff stood in the Rose Garden for 5 seconds after Trump said it. He didn't move. He didn't respond. He didn't reach for his phone or look at his aide or make a statement to the cameras that were all pointed at him. Waiting. For 5 seconds, Adam Schiff, a man who had spent 8 years speaking, investigating, impeaching, testifying, appearing, responding, always responding, had nothing to say. Then he turned around and walked out of the Rose Garden. No press gaggle in the hallway, no quick statement to the CNN correspondent who jogged alongside him, no post-confrontation tweet from the Senate steps. He walked to the northwest gate, got into a black SUV, and left the White House. For the first time in the feud, Adam Schiff had no response, not because he was wrong. His supporters would spend the next 72 hours arguing passionately that he was right about everything. Not because he was intimidated. Schiff had faced down Trump's fury for 8 years and would continue to do so, but because Trump had just performed for 30 minutes in his own garden, on his own stage, in front of his own cameras, and performance beats argument the way fire beats paper. You can be right and boring or wrong and riveting, and the cameras will follow the riveting every time. The clip, Go Home, Pencil Neck, Go Home, hit 78 million views in 48 hours. It became the most watched moment of the Trump-Schiff feud, surpassing the impeachment hearings, the censure vote, and every cable news appearance either man had ever made. 8 words outperformed 8 years. The reaction split along the exact lines that every reaction to every Trump moment had split along since 2015. The liberal media called it bullying, beneath the office, an embarrassment to the presidency. MSNBC ran Schiff's Constitution speech on a loop and called it the most dignified moment of the Trump era. The conservative media called it a demolition, the greatest press conference in history. And the moment Pencil Neck finally met justice, Fox News replayed the mortgage fraud section 14 times before midnight. The neutral observers, the ones who existed in the narrow strip of American political analysis between devotion and revulsion, noted something that both sides were reluctant to acknowledge. The insults were built on facts. The parody transcript was real. Schiff had read fabricated words into the congressional record and called it a parody. The whistleblower lie was real. PolitiFact had rated it false. The censure was real. 213 to 209 read in the well of the House. The mortgage fraud investigation was real. FBI ongoing. The declassified transcripts were real. Every witness had said no evidence. Every single one. Trump hadn't just mocked Schiff. He had mocked him with the evidence. The comedy was wrapped around substance the way insulation wraps around a wire. You felt the shock because the current was real. Schiff tweeted 4 hours later, "The President of the United States spent 30 minutes in the Rose Garden insulting my appearance and mocking my name. This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is what happens when a man with unchecked power decides to humiliate a political opponent on national television." The tweet received 2.3 million likes. Below it, the top reply from an account with no political affiliation, a nurse from Ohio named Rebecca something said. He also mentioned the parody transcript, the whistleblower lie, the censure, and the mortgage fraud. Are you going to address those? That reply received 4.1 million likes. The asymmetry was devastating. Schiff's tweet was about dignity. The reply was about facts. And in the economy of social media attention, the reply won. In the weeks that followed, Trump mentioned the Rose Garden confrontation at 3 rallies, 2 fundraising dinners, and a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan. Each time he told the story slightly differently, adding details, embellishing the comedy, improving the punchlines through the iterative process that had made his rallies the most watched political events in America. The mortgage fraud section became longer and funnier with each telling. The bobblehead joke acquired new variations. The closing line never changed. Schiff continued his Senate career. He continued appearing on cable news. He continued raising money. He continued being, in the view of Democrats, the most principled opponent of Donald Trump in public life. He had survived everything Trump had thrown at him for 8 years: insults, nicknames, impeachment, censure, the threat of prosecution, and he would continue to survive. That was the thing about Adam Schiff. He didn't break. He didn't retreat. He didn't change his position, or soften his rhetoric, or seek accommodation. He was in his way, as relentless as Trump, just quieter, just less entertaining, just less watchable. And that was the problem, because in the country that both men inhabited, a country where attention was currency and entertainment was power, and the most watched moment won regardless of its relationship to truth, Adam Schiff's dignity was worth precisely nothing against Donald Trump's showmanship. Schiff could be right about every fact and lose every news cycle. He could deliver the most constitutional, most principled, most legally sound argument in the history of American political rhetoric, and it would be buried on page 9 by "Go Home, Pencil Neck." This was not a new observation. Media critics and political scientists had been making it since 2015, but the Rose Garden made it literal. For 30 minutes on national television, a law professor and a professional wrestler stood in the same garden and addressed the same country. And the country watched the wrestler not because it agreed with him, because it couldn't look away. Trump ended the press conference the way he ended all of them, with a line that the reporters would carry with them to the filing center and that the cable networks would run as a banner until the next crisis replaced it. "You know," he said, leaning back from the podium, his hands on the lectern, "I have been dealing with Pencil Neck for 8 years, 8 years. Russia, Ukraine, impeachment, January 6th, the whole thing. 8 years of investigations and accusations and hearings and subpoenas, and you want to know the truth, the real truth." He smiled, the genuine one. I should send him a thank you card because every time he came after me, my numbers went up. Every single time. Russia hoax numbers went up. First impeachment numbers went up. Second impeachment? I got more votes the second time than the first. January 6th committee. I won the nomination by the biggest margin in Republican history. Pencil Neck Adam Schiff is the greatest campaign manager I never hired." Laughter. The press conference ended. Trump walked back to the Oval Office. The Rose Garden emptied. The cameras were packed away. The chairs were folded. And somewhere on I-66, in the back of a black SUV heading toward Capitol Hill, Adam Schiff sat in silence with a phone full of supportive texts and a mind full of constitutional arguments and the absolute unshakable certainty that he was right about everything. About Russia, about impeachment, about January 6th, about the threat that Donald Trump posed to the American Republic. He was perhaps right about all of it, but Go Home, Pencil Neck had 78 million views, and his Constitution speech had 400,000. In the economy of American politics, the real economy, the one that determines who governs and who remembers and who gets the last word, that ratio was the only number that mattered. Not because it was fair, not because it was just, not because it reflected the truth about either man, because attention is the only currency that buys power. And Donald Trump was the richest man in the room. He always was. In the end, the Rose Garden was not a debate. It was a demonstration of the principle that had governed American politics since the moment Donald Trump rode down a golden escalator in 2015 and changed the rules of the game. In a fight between substance and spectacle, spectacle wins, not because the public is stupid, not because the truth doesn't matter, but because the human brain is wired to remember the thing that made it feel something. Laughter, shock, outrage, delight, and to forget the thing that made it think. Schiff made people think. Trump made people feel. And in the competition for attention, feeling beats thinking every time. Adam Schiff knew this. He had known it for 8 years. He had watched Trump turn American politics into a reality show and had refused on principle, on conviction, on the sheer stubbornness of a man who believes that institutions matter more than entertainment, to participate. He had brought a legal brief to a comedy show. He had brought the Constitution to a roast. He had brought dignity to a cage match. And he had lost, not the argument, the audience. The Rose Garden proved what both men had always known, but only one of them had ever admitted. In the arena where American politics actually happens, not the arena of courtrooms and committee hearings and constitutional law, but the arena of screens and feeds and clips and shares, Donald Trump is unbeatable, not because he's right, because he's watchable, and in 2025, watchable is the only thing that matters. Schiff would continue to fight. He would continue to give speeches on the Senate floor. He would continue to appear on MSNBC and cite statutes and invoke precedents and make the case carefully and precisely, and with abundant evidence that Donald Trump was a danger to the Republic. He would continue to be right about many things and wrong about some things and principled about most things, and none of it would get 78 million views because Go Home, Pencil Neck already did. And in the economy of attention, the only economy that elects presidents and destroys senators and determines who gets remembered and who gets forgotten, 8 words from a showman in a garden will always be worth more than 8 years of arguments from a lawyer in a hearing room, always.